That was so good. I'm nervous now because she said all that stuff.
I know. I did my anxiety meditation before I came here, and now I'm all nervous because of her.
I didn't do that. I need to do something like that. I'm going to do that now. Hold on. Give me 15 minutes.
Well, Jason, thank you very much for coming to Athens, Ohio, and Ohio University. It's been a great summit. I actually just want to give a shout out to Josh Antonuccio and his staff for putting together this event. For the students here, you have no idea how rare it is to bring people in from all over the world to meet and mentor young people, and connections get made. And there's an intrinsic value to music, I think, art in general, but mostly music for me, that bonds people together. And those connections you make today hopefully will last you for many years, like mine. So.
I agree. I agree with you. I remember when I was in college in Memphis, pulling into the campus here, I thought to myself, this looks like a college, like from the movies in the 80s that look like a college. And where I went in Memphis, I love them. They're fantastic people, but it looks like a business center. It doesn't look like a university, it looks like somewhere you would go to work. But I remember I had this one friend who had a different REM T-shirt for every day of the week, and those were the only shirts that he had. So every time I saw him, I was like, "Oh shit, it's Wednesday," because he's wearing Life's Rich Pageant. So I got a test tomorrow. But I was still in contact with so many people that I met through a shared love for music. Really, that has held up relationship-wise better than any other barometer that I've had.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, we'll just start here a little bit. Just talk about the overarching sort of the musical journey you've been on, growing up in small-town Alabama, surrounded by adults, and your grandfather you spent a lot of time with.
Yeah, my granddad was a Pentecostal preacher, and we were in Alabama, but we weren't in Sand Mountain. When I tell people my grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher, I have to make that distinction. Because if you go 60, 70 miles east of us, they're handling snakes. So it's like we weren't averse to snakes, and there were certainly some people in my grandfather's church who did go to some of the other churches and probably did handle the snakes. We didn't do that, but we had this huge, loud rock and roll band in the church. So they had all the PV instruments and amplifiers, and it was loud, and it was beautiful, fantastic thing. And my parents were really young when I was born. They were 17 and 19, and they both worked, and so I spent most of my time, as far as daycare went, with my grandparents. We started out in a trailer in my grandparents' yard, and I would stay with them. My grandfather played all different kinds of musical instruments, all the hillbilly instruments. So he would teach me how to play guitar, banjo, mandolin, and that's how we would spend time together. That's how he would keep me out of trouble and sort of bond with me. And so I got very lucky that way. And then about a half an hour drive from where I grew up was Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where a lot of really great R&B and later on rock and roll and country records were made. And so as a teenager, I would follow around the musicians and the producers and the songwriters who had worked on those records in the 60s and 70s. And I got really lucky in that way, too. I mean, that's been really something that, the older I get, the more I appreciate, because I've met so many people. And if I say I'm from Muscle Shoals, then we have something to talk about. It doesn't matter, where they are on the rung. It could be Bruce Springsteen, and you tell him you're from Muscle Shoals, and he says, "Oh yeah, well I love that music," and it's like, yes, now I've got something that's not stupid to say to Bruce Springsteen, But more than that, it just gave me a really great education in how to play, and how to listen, and how to conduct myself professionally, which that one didn't take for a long, long time, but eventually I got there.
Slow start, strong finish.
Yeah.
Well, you got your first job at Fame.
I did, yeah. I wrote for Fame Studios on their writing staff. And I think they expected that I would, collaborate with other writers and try to write hit country songs. And I did not expect that. What I expected was to quit working at O'Charlie's. That's what I expected. And so I got what I wanted out of that deal. And I don't necessarily think they did. But, luckily I joined the Drive-By Truckers, a rock band from the South, right after that. Yes. Good. Every time I mention them, I tell them what the response was later. I text them. I'm like, yeah, it's good. Good in Athens, Ohio, guys. I joined that band, and they were kind enough to allow me to write some songs for those records when I was 21, 22 years old. And after that, I just stayed on the road, and I toured, and here we are.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about your time with the Truckers, and how open, were Patterson and Cooley to you writing material? Because I think, a lot of students, a lot of young people trying to break in, as a songwriter, sometimes hit roadblocks, so they can't get it heard. What was your sort of baptism like with the Truckers?
My experience is mine alone, first of all. But if somebody who looks and acts just like me were to come up to me and say, what do I do to get my songs heard? I would say, write a really good song. And then it will be heard. That's not the case with everybody. Some people don't have the opportunities that I had. But for me in that band, I came with outfit and decoration day. And I said, well, look, I wrote these songs for your band. And they said, okay,
Wow.
Sounds good, That being said, I had a lot of time to write those songs. I wrote them in a short period, but it was kind of like was it Henry VIII who commissioned the painting and paid the painter, and then 24 hours before he sent somebody to his house and said, either bring me a painting tomorrow or bring me this man's head. And so he went to the painter's house, and he said, you've had a year to work on this, and you've had the king's money, and if you don't have a painting done tomorrow, I'm going to kill you. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm almost finished. And so he came back the next day, and he had this beautiful portrait of the king. And he said, how long did it actually take you to paint that? And he said, I've been working on this painting my whole life. It was like that. It was like nobody had heard. And this is something that it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I want to point this out. Something that's very dangerous, I think, right now is the ability to share where you are before you've developed. Because as soon as you start sharing what you can do with people, that rate of improvement and learning, it slows down so much. And luckily, nobody gave a shit about me for the first, 22, 23 years of my life, and I could just be alone with my influences. And I could make mistakes, and I could figure out which mistakes to follow and which ones to let go of. I could sit around and ape the Beatles and Randy Newman and these things. I was allowed to do these things. Had I been given the opportunity to show people, oh, look what I can do on the guitar when I was 13, there's absolutely no way I would have continued to develop at the rate that I did.
Yeah.
Because I immediately would have become fixated on their response. And the thing I think right now that you have to be so careful about is don't show anybody what you can do, until you're at a certain point where it's safe to do that, because your brain will become addicted to that applause so quickly, and whatever money or success, whatever comes along with it. And at a certain point, you're not a child. There's no adult prodigies. Time is coming, and you will one day just be another person in a room with a bunch of really talented people.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to develop alone for as long as possible.
When did that sort of hit you? Like
Thursday. Next question.
Okay.
No, it just, watching TikTok and watching Instagram and thinking, man, that kid's a great drummer for 5 years old. And then you go back 2 years later and you're like, that kid's a great drummer for 5 years old, but now they're 7, you know, and now they're 9, and now they're 12, and people are still freaking out, but eventually they're going to stop freaking out. Yeah. But it you know, it expands into every avenue of creative work. You know, it's so impressive to see a little kid playing the bass. But really, if it wasn't a little kid, it would suck. You know, I'm sorry. But they get away with so much as bass players because they're 5. No way I would have that person in my band, even if they were tall enough to get on the stage. One day that will catch up with you, and you're not going to impress anybody anymore, and then you're just going to be another broke bass player, you know.
Actually, I had a question. You have a new bass player.
I do, yeah. Anna Butters from Australia. Anna's amazing. Yeah, you guys. Anna lived out here for quite a long time, and they developed as a jazz musician, and it just kind of blew my mind because we were rehearsing. The first time we were rehearsing with Anna, I had seen Anna play and heard their music before, and then the first time we were rehearsing, we would go into the outro from Freebird by Leonard Skinner, the band Leonard Skinner. We would go into the outro, and Sadler, my guitar player, and I would start playing the solo. And after about 3 or 4 times, Anna said, "That's really cool. What is that?" I was like, oh my God, we found the unicorn. Finally, in our band, we have someone who doesn't know what Freebird is. This has taken my whole life, and I couldn't be happier about it. And I love Freebird. You know, I played the solo 12 times when I was supposed to be rehearsing that day. But Anna has no exposure to that. You know, they grew up in Australia, in Adelaide, and then came over here and started playing jazz. And you know, so now it's like, oh, here's the Grateful Dead. And Anna's like, I thought that would be like heavy metal music from judging from the pictures on the T-shirts. It's awesome. I love it. I love it.
You know, you had the band together for a long time, and bands make changes, obviously, but it sounds like she was ready, or she ingratiated herself quickly.
Huh? They, not she.
They. Gotcha. Thank you for the correction. That they stepped up pretty.
Oh, it was fast. It was lightning fast, and the vibe was perfect. And I got super lucky, and everybody in the band got super lucky. And it doesn't always happen that way, but
right.
You know, we went through some friends, and we're kind of like, who do you suggest? And yeah. Luckily, you know, I have a lot of good friends that I trust in the music world now. And so when you need something like that to happen, first we had Dominic Davis, who plays with Jack White, fill in for quite a while, and that was a blast, you know. But Dominic's been playing with Jack since they were in elementary school in Detroit, you know. And yeah, it just worked out beautifully. You know, it's one of those things where the harder a decision is for me to make, the more it proves itself to be the right decision later on, you know. And this past year has been one of a lot of difficult decisions. And within a very short period of time after that, you know, I was like, okay, well, that was the right thing to do, you know. And it sucks at the time, but mistakes are always so easy, aren't they? Mm. You know, you don't ever think, well, that was a tough call, and also I fucked it up, you know. It's usually one or the other.
There was a line in an interview you said you thrive on making decisions before decisions make themselves?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's important. More often than not, if you make a choice, it'll be the right one. Mm. The problem is when you look up and you go, how did I end up here? Who are these people? How did my life get to this point? That just means you haven't been making your decisions for yourself, you know, because we all have sort of a, you know, unless you're like narcissist or a psychopath or something, we all have this sort of internal compass, you know, and if you actually do those things and make those choices for yourself, normally you'll wind up in a pretty decent spot.
Yeah. Do you have a moral code you live by?
No moral code. I think it's every man for himself. All this stuff that I'm saying, I figured out it makes me more money. I saw that on Reddit. I do have a moral code because I like people and I like the world and I like interacting with people and I like when I feel like I've been fair and I can sleep better and I can enjoy the part of my life that is just, I'm grateful beyond measure for all of this. It's so much fun. I get to make music and that's my job. And everybody I grew up around, their job sucked so bad.
Yeah.
And they hated their job, and it was most of their life was, I got to go do the terrible thing again every day, every morning. My parents was working so hard, and my uncles and my aunts and all my friends' parents and everybody was just like, this world sucks so bad. I got to go back to Walmart again, And that you can't say that at the University of Arkansas. So nice. But to get to make music for a living, wow, that's enough for me to really feel like, okay, surely I can be fair and honest and try to be, good with people whenever possible.
You talk about gratitude a lot, and gratitude towards your art and gratitude towards who you are as a person. How do those are those comparable at all, or because?
What do you mean? I'm trying to understand what you mean.
Well, the gratitude you have for your talents and your songwriting, and then the gratitude of like some of the life changes that you have made.
Oh yeah, it's all one thing.
Yeah.
It's all one big bowl. Yeah, because those things feed each other. It was no coincidence that I started having success as a songwriter and a recording artist at the same time that I started having success as a human being, especially because what I do is I just really needed something to write about early on. I thought I'm just going to tell all my secrets, And there's a Gillian Welch line in Wrecking Ball. I love Gillian Welch. I think, anytime somebody says I'm the best songwriter, I'm like, what happened to Gillian? They're like, you're the best songwriter. And I was like, did Kendrick and Gillian die this morning? But yeah, Gillian's got a line where she said, I took every secret I've ever known. And talking about leaving home, she says, I took every secret I've ever known and headed for the wall like a wrecking ball. And it's so beautiful to me, that idea of I need something to share and I need something to create with, and so I'm just going to use all the secrets that I have. And that's how I started writing, very much oversharing as a songwriter early on. And then once that sort of got sculpted away into something that was a little less cringy and more usable, I became an honest songwriter, what they used to call confessional, which we all hate that term, but the confessional song, every songwriter I know is like, that's the biggest bunch of shit, confessional. I'm just trying to talk about my life. And so those things are tied very closely together. And when I got my life in order, my work got in order too, because it's one big thing. And I had time to sit in that chair and work and not go out as soon as the sun started to drop and get drunk and try to fill up all the voids in my soul,
Do you go into the song or songwriting knowing what the story is going to be about?
No, not at all. Very, very rarely. Pretty much I just make characters and then follow them around, and that way they'll act pretty naturally. But also sometimes just the sound of a lyric or a turn of phrase, I'll sing something that's a cliche, and then I'll realize, oh, here's how I can use that. Here's how I can upend that cliche, and I let the work lead me, If I start off with a verse that's about, very often I'll start writing about something, and then I'll go back and completely edit out the first few lines because, the story has become something different. But I try to stay wide open. Like my main rule is don't stop. Don't stop to judge your work. Don't stop to edit. There's a difference in writing and editing. These happen at different times. And don't stop writing that song. Not even if you're not getting close to what you're trying to say, or if it's not about what you want, just follow it until it's done. And then you can go back and you can mess with it all you want to. But yeah, I don't know what these people are going to do when the song starts. They could do anything.
Are there characters that have reappeared in songs?
Yeah, many. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you which ones, but there's lots of them.
One?
Well, I mean, my father is in a
Right,
bunch
right.
of songs, but
Sure.
this is a version of my father that, he doesn't speak in rhymes, so we have to fictionalize him a little bit. We had to fictionalize him just a little bit. And myself, and yeah, there are tons of characters. I mean, even when you're trying not to, it happens.
I saw in an interview that you were talking about sort of, getting some maybe phrases or a melody down, but then really sort of opening your mind. How do you make that happen? It's because you're being sort of vulnerable
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Practice. You get confident enough in your own identity and your own worthiness. Worth, I guess is the word for that. I don't have to make a long word longer, but you get confident enough in who you are to where you think, if I reveal this to people, it's not going to cause everything around me to crumble. And then you start practicing revealing those things to people. And I really believe, like they say, you look at 1 million paintings, you'll be an art critic. I think if you write 1,000 songs, you're going to be a good songwriter, period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's what it takes. Now, I don't know. I've seen a couple people who probably disproved that in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. If you write 1,000 songs and then throw a chair off a roof, I don't know what made me think of that. I've thrown stuff at the cops. This one I can't say much about. It's been a while. No, you just do it over and over and over, and then your tastes develop, and you think, okay, this is what I like to hear. And if you'll follow what you like to hear, first of all, you'll never get all the way there, which is the most beautiful thing in the world when you realize I'm never going to write the song that's in my head completely, because then you're like, there's no end to this challenge. But you keep serving your own tastes, then your taste and your ability will grow at the same rate.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of songwriters I've talked to, sort of serving the song. Mm-hmm. And what does that sort of concept mean to you?
Well, you have to, first of all, you got to decide what you want. If you want to be as commercially successful as possible, my advice is not going to help you. That can be on your list of priorities, but if it's at the top, you need to be in a room with a group of people who know all the current catchphrases and who know the producers well enough to get those songs sent to those artists through those producers, and you need to try to write a hit every time. I love pop music. I listen to a lot of pop music. It doesn't find its way into my work outside of just maybe melody choices, but it's very relaxing for me. Mm-hmm. It's like how I kind of clear my head, because I'm not going to ride around and listen to Nick Drake and Joni Mitchell all the time. If I'm having a hard day, I don't want to literally die, So, like right now I listen to Chapel Roan songs if I'm having a tough day, because it makes me feel so good. But that's a different kind of song. If what you want to do is if rule number one is to communicate and connect, then yeah, you have to serve the song no matter what. To me, that means letting go of your ego and the idea that you have something to prove. And that is a tough one. That took me a long time, and it's still something I work on constantly. But the idea of what's better for this song rather than what's going to show people that I'm a good songwriter. Once you can get rid of that latter and just do the former, then you're truly serving the song.
Yeah, one of the songs on the current record, Save the World, and I saw you talk about how you couldn't write it from the perspective of an 18, 17 or 18-year-old that's been through a mass shooting, but you can relate to it as being in the grocery store.
Yeah, being a terrified father, that I can definitely write about.
Yeah.
That I know. And that song, from a songwriter perspective, that's not a perfect song. And it's also, it doesn't sound just like The Police, which is kind of what I wanted. Not The Police like the cops, The Police like... There was a band called The Police.
Don't stand so close
They
to
were
me.
so good, but don't dig too deep. Because there's some creepy shit on those records. If you are a student, do not go listen to The Police at my behest. But that's an imperfect song, but it is a perfect emotion. And so I needed to stop squeezing it and stop trying to be, witty and songwriterly and just say how I felt. And it was difficult. It took me a few passes. The first time I wrote it, it was vague and it wasn't right. And then I went back and I did it and I cleaned it up and I made a real story happen and a real perspective happen. And then I put a big, stupid, Thin Lizzy guitar part at the end, because you can't just leave them crying on the floor,
No, you got to
You got to do something that
send them out with
rocks.
some rock and roll.
Yeah.
But there's also songs, I would say Cast Iron Skillet, you said that that song has been around for a while for you.
Sort of. The idea for it has,
Yeah.
I was trying really hard to write that song for a long time. So when I was in high school, a couple of my former buddies killed a man in town, and I'd grown up with these boys. I spent the night at their house, and we were on the same baseball team. And our dads coached the baseball team together. They were brothers, and one was my age, and the other was a couple years younger. And they went down a different path and started getting in trouble. And I started playing in bands and playing baseball, and we diverged. And then when we were 18 or so, they murdered somebody very violently. Robbed him of almost nothing, and he was a fixture in the community, and everybody was angry, and everybody was sad and scared, and then about a year after that, I got arrested for a traffic violation, and not a drunken traffic violation, but I made a stupid turn, and my driver's license was out of date, so they took me to jail, and I made the mistake of asking about one of those boys, and of course, cops are like, we're going to scare this guy straight. So they took me and they woke him up and made him get up and talk to me. They were awaiting trial, and he was like, what the hell are you doing in here? And I was like, I'm good. On my way out, but it was really intense. And then the younger brother passed away in prison during COVID, probably of COVID. But I've been trying to write that song ever since I was 19, 20 years old. And it was just so difficult for me to wrap my mind around telling the truth as I saw it and talking about how I felt, and also not leaving a wake of victims of my work, because there were already enough victims. Sometimes that's it. Sometimes it's like when you're being honest, like when we were close, that song, I'll mention this now because I don't want it to come back up. But that song was one of those where I had to say, how many victims if I tell the truth? How many victims if I don't? And then you make that choice, because the song has to exist. I don't know why, but I decided on that a long time ago because that's what I do. That's who I am. So, usually if you tell the truth, you make less victims than if you don't. And so that's what I wanted to do.
Is there an example of a song that you've written and recorded and it has changed over time?
The performance and the delivery of the songs has changed. The meaning of the songs, not really. Now, sometimes it seems like a different person wrote them, I'll tell you something. Recently, I was having really bad vocal problems. I wasn't able to sing for a while. And I learned that it was psychosomatic just because I've been going through so much stress. And when I figured that out, I was like, oh, you're crazy, you know, how fun. But I was very glad to know that it was that, glad to have the information. I wasn't happy that I was crazy, but I was happy to know that I was crazy. I feel like that's a big step toward not being crazy. And but the songs that I had no trouble with were the old songs, the ones that I wrote when I was drinking and stuff. And that was really interesting to me for a lot of reasons. But now when I sing those, they still mean the same thing, but they don't exactly feel like I wrote the songs because I've just changed so much, you know.
Yeah.
They feel more like gifts than creations of mine now, the older
Really?
songs. Yeah, because I think, well, I'm still playing Alabama Pines because I still love that song. And it was such a huge thing when I wrote that song back then. That was the first song out of my solo work that really, caught on with a wider audience. And I was so grateful for it. And now I look back on it, and it's like, it just feels like the greatest gift to have received that song at a time when we were in the van and, we couldn't hear ourselves and we were playing little shithole bars and everybody was so exhausted all the time. And to have that song, there's a lot of hope in there. There's a lot of, I might be able to do that again.
Yeah.
And then, I might be able to do that 5 or 6 times for one record or 8 or 10 times, and it just kept going. But that was the first glimmer of like, this might be sustainable,
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, when did you sort of realize that it was going to be sustainable, that you were going to be, was it the Southeastern record or before that?
Well, I never had enough sense to quit, I remember there was one night that my business manager called me, and I went through a half a dozen business managers probably because they would just keep calling and saying, you have no business to manage. And I'd be like, all right, thanks for trying, One night, I was at the bar, after the show, and I was just sitting at the bar crying, drinking. Just a really great scene, like picture, giving off the best possible vibes. And Derry, my keyboard player, he came up and he's like, what's wrong? You seem like you're going through it today. You're drinking and crying at the same time. And I said, the business manager called and said that I have to either fire one of the band members or the crew person. We had one person on the crew, and he did everything he could do, and and never slept, and it was just our buddy, our tour buddy. And I said, so we're just not going to have a tour buddy anymore. And I remember Derry was like, you're insane. Yeah. Like, you're an insane person. He told me years later, he was like, that was the moment when I realized this might actually work. Because rather than get rid of one of the band members, which, Derry's the keyboard player, he thought, oh, I'm about to get sent home,
Deep sixth home.
Yeah. I was like, no, we can load our own shit. We can drive ourselves. We'll be fine. I need it to sound right. And but with that being said, we just really soon after Southeastern came out, we were playing off-Broadway in St. Louis. And I remember pulling into the parking lot, and the show had sold out. But also there were people there in the parking lot who knew they weren't going to get into the show. And they had come to be in the parking lot. And we got out of the van, and everybody in the band was like, what the hell is going on? I was like, oh, it worked. And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, it worked. This is what happens when it works. Because I'd seen that with the Truckers years before, and that wasn't my band, and it happened on Southern Rock Opera, which I didn't play on, but I'd seen it. So it was one of those moments where you're like, it worked, it was so cool. And after that, we sold out like a year's worth of shows, and then started moving up rooms, and we got in a bus really soon. And, the bus is the thing. Everything after you get on the tour bus, everything else is just another something. Because the tour bus, you can lay down, you can go to sleep, you can pee without stopping at a gas station. You can buy groceries and put them in the refrigerator. You don't have to eat damn Chick-fil-A every day or something. Like, it is the true mark of, like, I remember we were playing with Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson's tour bus pulls up to the stage. He gets off the bus. He goes on stage. He plays. He gets back on the bus, and it rolls out. And I did the same thing that night. And I thought to myself, well, I'm as big a deal as Willie fucking Nelson. Like, on a practical level, that's as good as it gets, you know? The bus is still, it's still the thing, man. I saw a Ford Econo line on the street yesterday with a bunch of punk rock stickers on the back, and I almost started crying. Like, you know, because it hurts. It hurts, man. Playing 200, 250 shows a year in a van hurts bad.
Yeah.
Even when you're 25 years old.
Can you take a shit on your tour bus?
I mean,
because that's the general rule. Is that the general rule?
I take a shit anywhere I want, man. I'll take one right here if I feel like it.
What about if some stupid journalist comes on the tour bus?
I got a guy that just squeegees right behind me.
Sorry, didn't.
You know, the secret is you can shit on all the tour buses. You just shouldn't. Be a hero.
Yeah. I did an interview with your old bandmate and friend Patterson Hood, and as I'm sure you know, and everyone, people that hear, they're going to go out and do the 20th anniversary or play Southern Rock Opera start to finish. And I was talking to him about some of the songs because a lot of them seem to have aged fairly well. You know, there's certain issues that he was writing about Southern identity that are still sort of relevant today. But so I asked him about the Southern thing, the song, and he said it's the best rock song I've ever written, the melody, but I don't like it because it didn't quite capture what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Have you had that sort of?
Yeah, all of my songs have done that.
I know, and you said you write and then you edit. You don't do it at the same time. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, it would be easier for me to list the ones that I think are done and correct and as good as I could get them. You know, If We Were Vampires is fucking done. That song's done. You know, thank you. Cast Iron Skillet, that song's done. I'm not going to keep going if you keep clapping. You're making it weird. Oh, somebody wants me to shut up. That's kind of like when you go off stage for the encore and they're like, one more song. You're like, we got 3 more on the set list. But no, most of them, if I went back and messed with them now, I could make them better. But I'm not going to do that. Nobody likes that.
Do you change lyrics in the show sometimes?
In the show sometimes, yeah. But sometimes that's because I forgot what the original one was. But I'm not going to go back and tinker with stuff, you know. Plus, I own my master recordings. Yeah, how about that? So, yeah, I don't have to do a Jason's version. You already have it.
What do you love most about songwriting?
It reminds us of what we have in common. That's my favorite thing about it. And when you're super specific and you're super detailed and you let yourself throw the knuckleball, you know, which is to write something that you think this is not going to resonate with people because it's too specific to my life, then we all think we know a secret about each other. Because it's like, how could he know this about me? And I think, how could this resonate with them? I don't know them at all. And so all of a sudden, we're reminded of how similar we are.
Mm-hmm. You have a great analogy with it's talking about like a bed of rocks, and that you turn over the rock to as many.
Yeah, it's out there. The right word, the right phrase, it's out there somewhere. But it's a big field of rocks, you know. And sometimes it's the first one you pick up. So it's kind of like playing a memory game with a kid, you know. Sometimes you pick up it's the last one, but you just have to keep turning them over. And the thing is, your job is to get better at knowing when you see it, knowing it's right. you know, because a lot of it, after a while, you feel like you're solving this crossword puzzle, because it's like you've got a certain amount of space, syllables, it's got to sound right, rhyme right, it's got to, you know, check off the boxes in your head of the right word or the right phrase. But when you nail it, man, like what I'll do sometimes is I'll sing into my phone, play the guitar, and get like the verse pattern, the chorus pattern, maybe the bridge, and then I'll go for a walk and I'll put my headphones in. I'll walk around the. Headphones are what we used to call AirPods, because they would go over your whole stupid head. I'll put my AirPods in, AirPods Pro. Yeah, doing pretty well. And then I'll just walk around the block and I'll listen to my voice memo. And then, like it happened last week, I was walking in New York and I got it. I got the line. I'm just walking around mumbling like half the other people in New York City. And, but I have a purpose, you know. It's not schizophrenia for me. You know, I just start jumping up and down because I got it. You know, there's still the greatest feeling in the world when you turn over that right rock, and you get better at knowing. That's really all you get better at, is knowing that it's the right one. You know, a big part of a musician's job or a producer's job or a songwriter's job is just knowing when to say, okay, that part's done. That's all Rick Rubin does. He just sits there cross-legged and goes, all right, you're done. Or you're not done, you know. And he's a genius, and it works, and it's great, because he's like the best on earth at saying that's done or that's not done. You know, it takes a lot of practice to say that's finished or you need to keep looking, you know.
Yeah. I think what also fans and myself really identify with in your songwriting is that you look for details that other people don't see. Does that come from reading? I know you're a big reader. Does that come from...
It all comes from trauma, Matt, all of it.
That was more therapy?
Everything. No, but reading also. Trauma and reading. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That perspective is so interesting to me. Being able to look at something from a different angle, and because there's a lot of songs, and there's a lot of really, really great songs. And if you're going to write a love song, you got to come up with something serious to say, because all these songs already exist. At Last already exists. You know, what are you going to do? You're going to go listen to At Last, or you're going to write another love song that we don't need? You know, so for me, like when I started writing If We Were Vampires, I was like, okay, well, what is it about some love songs that I don't like? Let's start from there, you know. It was almost like a writing exercise. It's like, what's wrong with this guy's song? And it's like, it's not this, and it's not this, and it's not that. And that's literally how the song goes. It's not this, it's not that, it's not that. And then by the time I got to the chorus, I was like, so what is it? Why? Why do I love you? Outside of just you and me and our personalities and our connection and our place in the world, why am I even fucking bothering? And it was like, oh, because I'm going to die. You know, that's it. If not, I'd be like, I'll get around to that later, you know. To everything, you'd be like, yeah, I'll get it. And then it was like, you know, I thought, oh, if we weren't going to die, we would just suck. All of us would just be the biggest piece of shit in the world if we weren't going to die. So there's your motivation, you know. And then all of a sudden I had something to say, you know. But it all started from that, you know, the awareness that there are that many love songs already in the world. So you've got to find a way to start to get that knot to come loose. And to do that, sometimes you just choose a detail that you think nobody else would have noticed. And you go from there.
You'd mentioned that in another interview that sort of the drinking and then partying with when you were the truckers sort of hid the truth and reality of what sort of the upbringing was in a small Alabama town. And as someone who hones in on details, what are you paying attention to now?
What am I paying attention to now? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Well, you got to be careful. You know, if you're at, like, I'm 45 and I have had success as a songwriter, you got to be real careful because, you know, you start making good choices as a human being, and a lot of your own personal dramas either get resolved or they don't feel like that big a deal. And so almost everybody, with the exception of Bob Dylan, because he does everything in the reverse order, like he started out writing about the greater world and then ended up writing very specifically about Bob Dylan. That's weird. Most of us are 19 and we're like, my heart is broken, I am in love. And then you're 45 and you're like, stop going to war. And everybody's like, yeah, I agree, but that song fucking sucks, you know? Because it's vague, but Bob did it the other way around, like he always does. But, you know, I have to be very careful because I have a handle on a lot of things that I would have written about when I was 19, 20, 21 years old. And now I think, oh, that's not worth writing a song about. That's a childish emotion. And that's where you're making a mistake because there's value in those childish emotions, you know. So you have to let yourself understand and appreciate and not disregard the way you felt when you were that age. And sometimes you got to let yourself feel that way again. Mm-hmm. You know, right now, I mean, I've gotten fortunate because my life is a mess. So it's like, I got all kinds of shit to write about. No, it's not a mess. I'm kidding. It's I just had one of those years where all these really good things and all these really bad things happened, you know, right in the same time. And also, I'm doing a lot of things now that I've never done sober before. Mm. And so, wow, I feel like a teenager in a lot of ways. And this is wonderful for creative pursuits.
What type of things?
Well, I said as much as I want to say about that.
Fair enough.
But it's what I'm saying is it is extremely valuable for you as an older, more mature person, whatever the hell that means, to stay in touch with that, not just the inner child, but the inner adolescent. And if you're going to create, don't write off those emotions. Don't think I've got all that fixed and that was all embarrassing to me. Stop being embarrassed, first of all, by everything. Just cut that shit out. There's no use to it. Shame is useless. You know, accountability is great, but shame is useless. Start looking at that and thinking, why did I feel that way? And when do I feel that way now? And then you won't feel the need to write, you know, big, vague anthems that nobody cares about, like U2 writes now or something, you know. I'm sorry. I mean, they're great. They know it, you know. They're a great band, but you heard that last single. Don't act like I'm pulling something.
Which, the U2 one?
Yeah.
Atomic City?
Yeah. Oh, boy.
That was bad in the Sphere show I saw.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah. And they always want to do it. They always want to do the new single. And you're like, man, you really know how to do the new single. It's cool. It's great. We love it. Yeah.
You are a teller of the truth. That's one of sort of the foundational things in your life. But is there a difference then between an artist and an entertainer?
Yeah, I mean, you can be both. Like, you can be a, you know, house painter and a golfer. But don't confuse the two. Yeah, there's a difference. It's what are your priorities, you know? I think if you have something that you need to get out, and that's your number one priority, then you might be an artist, you know? I think if you have other priorities, like taking people's mind off of what's bothering them, or, you know, showing people a good time, or if you have this need to please everybody, or if you just want to be a big star, you might be an entertainer. I don't think there's a real value. I mean, we're all just little bugs crawling around, so it's not like one of us is doing a better job than another one in the overarching sense of things. But yeah, I get mad at, you know, recording artists so-and-so McSo-and-so. And like, yeah, recording artist. The artist is doing a lot of work right there. I wish they would just say, like, huge superstar so-and-so, recording artist, this guy that played in a tiny bar last night. Because I do feel like there's a difference, but it's just intention. That's all it is, It's just what are you trying to do? And if you got 10 people writing your songs for you, and you're in the gym every day, and you got a glam squad, and you're rehearsing dance moves, there's a chance you might be an entertainer. You might not be an artist, and that's okay, And if you're drinking yourself to death and a bar in Sandusky, you might be an artist,
I don't know about Sandusky, but maybe.
They got nice roller coasters. When I said roller coaster earlier, I thought of Sandusky. Yeah.
How was it for you? This last record was one that you took over the production reins after 3 records, I think, with Dave.
With Dave, yeah.
Obviously, that seems to be like a natural sort of progression for you to sort of take over those duties. What did you get out of that?
It was really easy and fun. Whereas with Dave, it was hard and terrible. Every single day.
He just sits and orders food into the studio.
He does, yeah, he does. No, I enjoyed working with Dave, but I got to a point where I felt like I can do this without breaking it. And that was all I needed to try it, because there's so much ego. Like going into the studio as a producer, if you're not careful, you'll spend the whole time thinking, I got to produce. I got to produce right now. When do I produce, How do I produce this guy? And it took me a long time after I got sober and started doing this sort of psychological work, going to therapy and all that kind of stuff to figure out, okay, I don't need to prove anything to anybody, And that was the only way to do service to the songs and the musicians and the album itself, was to go in there without needing to prove anything. Because then you can say, all right, we can just play this, or we need to add something or take something. You're not sitting there thinking, oh, I got to be producing. I got to put, and that was a big one for me. Producing is like that's the vaguest job in the music business, because it's so different. Some people go in and they mic everything themselves. Some people work inside the computer the whole time. In pop, hip hop, they'll make the whole song out of just pieces. And then some people just go in and get 3 or 4 good musicians and roll up a bunch of joints and sit there, and everything in between. I think the only thing you shouldn't do as a producer is sit there thinking about producing all day.
Mm-hmm. Will you produce the next record, do you think?
I don't know. It depends on what the songs want.
Have you written songs for?
I have, yeah. Many. Yeah, I've been writing songs lately. Yeah. I think they're good songs. The ones that are done, some of them are terrible, but they'll be good. They'll be good eventually.
Do you chart them at home? Like, do you have a little spreadsheet?
No, I don't have any of that. I don't have a spreadsheet. I don't know how to work that program.
Dry erase board?
Yeah. No, I have just a notebook and a pen. That's what I have. And I'll go through it and I'll go, oh, I remember that one. That one's great. Or, yeah, that one's not so good. Let's get back to work on that. I just have a stack of notebooks and a package of pens.
Are the notebooks labeled at all?
No, No, they just got Beyonce stickers on them. That's how I know they're mine.
Do you, you've got the songwriting, the singing, the music, live performance, the acting. Are you afraid not to work? Sometimes?
That's a good question. I appreciate that question. I don't know. What's that? Is my tour manager still over there? Hey, Ding, am I afraid not to work? Just nod. I get this. Maybe a little bit. Just at the time being, yes. I just love working, and I don't think it's about this sort of like concern that everything's going to go away, or I think I just really love working creatively. Really all I do is I'm either working at one of the things that you just said, or I'm hanging out with my kid. We're going to Dave and Buster's or the zoo or something, and that's it. That's my life, and I that's great. I think it's fantastic. It's but yeah, there may come a point where I have to figure out how not to work so much. But I don't know, man. I remember John Prine, when he was late in his life, in his 70s, and he'd been through all this cancer treatment, all this stuff, and still we'd be on stage and he'd be looking at the clock, and the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, he's tired, and he was like, God damn it, we've only got 15 minutes left. I'm like, all right, buddy. Make it count.
Speaking of making it count, you said something to me.
This is water.
Freaked me out the first time I ever had one of those. So those like
I know.
Jägermeister in a glass or
Yeah,
in a can.
This is water. That's all.
I just blanked out with Jägermeister. Do you have any plans to do more film work?
Yes.
Fair enough.
I don't plan to do the kind of movies that we can talk about in advance, though, because I don't love it. It's not my favorite thing. But if there's a really, really great story that I can help somebody tell, I love that. So I don't want to be an actor, but occasionally I do want to act. So yeah, there's a couple things that I might do, but we'll see. They had to be just right. And when I was on the Scorsese set, it was really hard to answer those questions because like some of the other actors would come up and be like, I'm not talking about like Leo or Bob or like Lily, or I'm talking about some of the other actors that were more in the background would come up and say, "Are you going to do more of this? It seems like you're doing a great job." And I would be like, "Well, if something great comes up like this, yeah." And they would be like, "Oh, I had to do a commercial for hemorrhoid cream last week. Like, must be nice, And I was like, well, I love my job so much. And as time goes on, I love it more and more and more and more. And it never gets, I don't get bored with it. I was telling somebody this the other night, and this is strange, I know, but if you're a musician, I think you probably understand what I'm saying. The ultimate dream was to be able to hear everything on stage. The whole band, everything, every dynamic shift, every note that the bass player is playing, the hi-hat, the kick drum. I can hear all of that. Why would I stop? Like if you ever played in a bunch of shitty bars over and over and over and you thought I would give anything just to be able to hear what I'm doing right now. Like you would murder a stranger for that at that moment. And now I go on stage and I can hear everything. Who wouldn't love that, man? And the band is so good, and we like each other, and like we love hanging out with each other. And I've got all these incredible guitars and shit. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to act. I want to do that over and over and over and over and over. But that being said, yeah, if there's something where I feel like Killers of the Flower Moon, that story was, it's unbelievable, and we should all have already known it. And I felt like it was handled beautifully. Certainly there were some critics, and as there should have been, and I agree that a lot of that violence was, extremely triggering for a lot of folks, and I can't disagree with that at all. But I saw that all go down, and I thought these people are trying their best to tell the story the right way.
Yeah.
And so I was just over the moon to be out there helping, But, I mean, the job is I have a calling of sorts, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to ask. You're 44?
45.
I'm 53. Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks. My birthday was yesterday. I made it.
Was it
52.
yesterday?
It was
Happy
yesterday.
birthday. Oh my God.
It doesn't mean shit.
You get a cake?
I
You
made
get a
it through
cake?
52.
Did you
But
get a cake?
I did get a cake.
What kind of cake?
Carrot cake.
Ooh, I love carrot cake. Yes. Everybody's clapping for the carrot cake.
Yep.
Yeah.
My
Good.
wife did me a solid.
Yeah.
Over there.
Good job. Carrot cake is, next level.
But I was going to ask about the job. It's like there's not many occupations where you can go out 100 nights a year for 2 hours and just lay it all out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
it feels really good.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And I could, even if I'd been a pro athlete, I'd be long since retired by now, you know. I still get to go out there and get everything out every night. And it's awesome. So fun. And still, like, you know, you feel like the thing that I missed work-wise the most during the lockdown was not the audience or any of that. I mean, I love you guys are great. Everybody, wonderful. Thank you. But the thing that I missed the most was just driving the boat, you know, because when you're on stage, you feel like there's this huge machine behind you, you know, and they do whatever you want. Like, I wrote all these songs, and these people are all such incredible musicians, and they're all trying their best to play these songs that I made up about my relationship and my dad. And like, that's amazing. You feel like you're flying a fighter jet, you know? And I miss that so much, just the interaction between us on stage. It's visceral, and it's very healing for me. You know, I'm not going to compare it to meditation or, you know, gonging or anything like that, but I'm sure there's some overlap between that and, you know, a lot of healing techniques people use.
Well, I think we will see that tonight later.
Yes, we're all gonna get a sound bath tonight.
Did you bring the 59 Gibson?
No, well, I'm playing a solo show, so that would be really weird.
Solo
I mean, I would
electric?
do it. Now that you've mentioned it, I'm thinking about it for the next one. No, I just have acoustic guitars tonight. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to turn to some questions that have been sent.
Oh yeah, there's a screen there, but I don't know if
those
it's
are
real or.
Where? Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay, here we go.
You're like, nope, can't say that in public.
You're a big reader. Alex has a question that says, what's your favorite Cormac McCarthy book and why?
Blood Meridian, because it's fucking brutal.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll tell you something. Somebody told me who knew him really well at the end of his life. They said that he was happy. He was a happy person. And his personal life was not what you saw in those books. And that made me really, really happy, you know. But yeah, Blood Meridian, because it's the truest, because there's no happy ending, you know. But the knife fight at the end of the Border trilogy, my God, like he did so many things where I was like, oh, that's probably how that really went. You know, we've seen such dramatized, softened up versions of all these things. And then McCarthy was like, let me show you what I think that was really like a 9-minute knife fight. Like, oh my God. Like, if you've ever been in a fight, like as an adult, 2 minutes is too long to fight.
I was going to say 30 seconds.
That's a long time to fight, man. If you're fighting for over 5 minutes, that is a terrible experience for everybody involved, you know. So that knife fight at the end of, I don't know, was it Cities of the Plain or whatever the last one was in the Border trilogy? That was unreal.
I have to share a Cormac McCarthy story. One of my friends was working for his agent, and the accounts payable called my friend, and it's like, we've been sending these checks to Cormac McCarthy, and he hasn't returned any, or, hasn't received them. Some of them have been sent back, and so apparently he goes down to, from where he lived, he went down to like the general store where they has them. And my friend was like, well, how much money how much are the checks worth? He's like, $1.1 million. And Cormac could give two shits about it.
I mean, you can't spend it if you don't have it, you know?
Right.
Maybe that was his savings account.
Question from Matt here. How do you determine your nightly set lists? There are clearly songs that are staples. And how do you determine what songs will fill those gaps?
I don't even know what kind of phone that was.
It's like,
Was that a Palm Pilot? I go to setlist.fm.
oh,
I'm serious.
Oh, I love that site.
It's the best because I look at it and I'm like, what did I play last time I was here? Let's change it up a little bit. That's how I do it every night. And then luckily now we have a big enough catalog where I can, control the dynamics of the set and be kind of like, I think we can get away with 3 acoustic songs right here and then pick them back up at the end. But everything changes when you're doing multiple nights, like when I'm at the Ryman, we're doing 8 nights over 2 weeks. My crew will tape up the set lists from every night on the wall and then from the previous run. So I can look at those and go, all right, every night you got to start with a different one, and you probably should end with a different one. But everything in between, you need to figure out, the mood. What night of the week is it? And it's really mostly arbitrary, but it's fun.
Question from Michael here. You're about to tour with Alejandro Escovedo and Zach Bryan.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
Yeah.
Will you tell us your thoughts on working with them, and have you all considered recording together?
I think they're both fantastic. But here's a question. First of all, Alejandro's one of the coolest people I've ever met. Zach Bryan's is super nice. He's been super cool to me, and he always talks about how much he likes my songs, and it's really sweet. And I'm very glad that he's, involved, like big time, super famous right now. I think it's good for a lot of people. But when people say "I love you," and do they sit down at dinner, and are they like, man, this steak is so good, and this pie, this key lime pie is amazing. I wish there was a such thing as steak pie. Like, let me just put them together. No, I don't need to record with everybody you like. Like, just let us do our thing. If you like it, stop trying to fuck with it. It's... anytime, if somebody likes the way you smell, they will always say, you smell so good. Have you tried this cologne other than the one you're wearing? And you're like, no, I thought you said you liked it. Like, I had that problem solved. Of course, I would record with those people, but if I did, nowadays you got to surprise the shit out of everybody with everything, so I couldn't tell you about it now, It's got to be like, guess who just did a collab, It's terrible. You got to sneak up on people. Their attention span's so short now. You got to jump out from behind a closet and be like, we did a collaboration. Please don't forget about it in 12 hours.
Well, I asked you this 7 years ago if you've been asked to co-write, and you have been, but it declined. Is that still?
Yeah, I've declined most of the co-writes. I don't like doing that.
Fair enough. I hate most people, so.
Yeah, I like the people. I like a lot of people, and I like writing songs. But there and again, you have the steak and key lime pie thing. I don't want to write songs with people. I want you to leave me alone.
Question from Rich. Could you walk us through the song Only Children? Was it as addictive to write as it is to listen to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we were this is going to sound so fancy, I'm sorry, but it's true. So Amanda, who I was married to, and me, who I was, and my best friend Will, and his wife Heidi. Will is the global editor-in-chief of GQ magazine. He wasn't when we met. He just got out of college. We've been buddies for decades, and he worked his way up. We all went on vacation together to Hydra. It's an island in Greece, and they don't have any cars, you know, and you have to put your luggage on a donkey, and it takes that. It's amazing, but it's where Leonard Cohen wrote a lot of his earliest songs. It's when they put in the telephone wires there. He saw a bird on one of them and started writing "Bird on a Wire," you know. So that was one of the reasons that we went there. And we were all one night, you know, we were sitting around a fire outside on the side of this mountain talking, and I said, you know, I miss the days when me and all my friends would sit around in a circle and just play each other our new songs, because that doesn't really happen much anymore. You know, you get to a certain point and everybody's off working and playing and touring, and you don't wind up sitting around a dinner table and playing songs like you did when you were 18 or 19 years old. And so we started doing that. And Will was working on this piece on Ram Dass for GQ magazine. His wife was working on a book, and Amanda was working on a song, and I was working on a song. And so we all just started sharing with each other there. And then I think the next day, for the next round of that, I wrote that song "Only Children," and I think doing that, you know, sharing our work like that, took me back and reminded me of certain people that I'd grown up around that weren't with us anymore, you know, and got me in a version of nostalgia that I didn't feel like was too far from the truth. And then when we got in the studio, we got David Crosby came in and sang on it. So at one point we were all just in the recording room, huddled around a microphone, singing harmony with David Crosby. I felt like I was in a completely different time. It was unbelievable. It's like, you know, felt like I was in 1971. You know, it was great, really great.
Sort of along that lines, Tyler has a question that says, "What environments do you prefer to write songs in?"
I think I stopped asking myself that question a long time ago, you know, because it just
happened.
Quiet.
Yeah, right.
You know, the last one that I wrote on tour, I had to go out and tell the crew to stop making noise. You know, I was just in the dressing room, and I just had to run out and go, turn everything off. And I'm writing a song. And they were like, turn everything off, he's writing a song. And, you know, like, where do you most like to pee, Tyler, you know? You just got to go, man, and hope nobody's looking.
Jeff has a question. Do you purposely look for imperfect rhymes because perfect rhymes seem too strong or predictable?
Yes, without a doubt, yes. But I don't know if I would, I don't use the term imperfect for those, you know, because I feel like the trickier they are, the more perfect they are. I call them, Patterson used to call them Loretta Lynn rhymes. You know? She's got so many of those that just like, whoa, how did you make that rhyme? It's genius. But yeah, that's one way to get out of cliche, you know. And that is really, yeah, that's a good, I think, thing that young songwriters can do. It's like, if you're talking like the Eminem rant, you know, if you're talking about pain, it doesn't need to be happening in the rain, you know. It's that, like there's certain rules that you just like, I gotta find something a little bit weirder, you know.
Teresa has a question. Have you...
Read the whole question before you start reading it aloud.
Well, I mean, this okay.
Go for it. You know, go for it. Let's see what happens.
Have you always been socially liberal and felt compelled to express that in your songs? If not, what started that progression?
No. There was a point when I was a child. But soon after, I became socially liberal. You know, I got tired of people fucking with me for stuff that wasn't none of their business. So I decided probably pretty good for me to not fuck with people that's not, you know, for things that aren't any of my business either. And the snowball got bigger. And as soon as I got a platform, I felt compelled to use it. Yeah, that's really it, you know. Like, we all give each other so much shit. And very often, like, if it doesn't affect you, you don't have a right to give me a hard time about it. It's
Right.
pretty simple.
Yeah.
You know, and if it does affect you, we should negotiate.
Right.
That's it, you know. And we can use all these words, politics, liberal, whatever, all that stuff. so it makes it easier to ignore, because I don't have to pay attention to that stuff. I got all whatever, but because there are people who have to pay attention to it, I feel like I'm responsible for helping them pay attention to it.
Right.
If you don't have clean water, politics means clean water. If you don't have a school to send your kid to, politics means sending your kid to school. Just because I've been really lucky doesn't mean I get to go, oh, I'm so tired of talking about politics. Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, it would be the same. It would be the same to say, man, I'm so tired of wiping my own ass. I'm so glad I've got Steve over here to wipe my ass. Like, there are many people who have to get up in the morning and deal with things that we call politics, and because of that, we should all deal with those things in some way or another.
Right.
Anyway, that's I don't know if that's what Teresa meant, but thank you, Teresa.
Well, unfortunately, I think we've reached our time.
Are we done? I was having so much fun. I was getting riled up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jason. Thank you,
Thank you,
Josh.
Matt.
Thank you, Madam President. And we'll see everybody tonight, hopefully.
See you tonight, I hope. Thank you all very much. That was fun. Thank you.